Hi, I'm Amber, the editor of Handmade Seller magazine. I'm here to give you a sneak peek of what is in our latest issue that is now available. So here's the magazine. We do offer our magazine in both digital and print options. Print is available in the US, but I thought it would be fun to actually talk about what goes into the magazine. Why did I pick what I picked for this issue of the magazine? So I'm going to flip through, show you a little bit about what it actually looks like, and talk about what did I include in this particular issue. And my theme around this issue was a lot around tinkering and people actually trying to iteratively improve things and systems. It wasn't about immediate revolutionary breakthroughs, but a lot of it was featuring people that were tinkering with their business models or how and why that got into different aspects of their business. And so let's take our first person that we featured. So Jen, our cover artist, is from Forged Flair, and they make handmade ornaments. These absolutely exquisite, beautiful ornaments. And like many handmade business owners, she started her business and really going full-time with her business after a layoff. It's a really common kind of thing. There's a career interruption and you take a different path. I imagine many of you watching this can also relate to that as well. At the beginning of her business, it was a hodgepodge, like many businesses, trying out lots of different things, trying to figure out what would be the theme and what would stick. And then when she focused on one particular area, her ornaments, that's when things really took off for her. But like many handmade business owners, she really started to find the customer service and keeping up with different things, and how many would actually hear from people, oh, you're too expensive, and all the shtick that you're used to hearing as a handmade business. And she started writing out responses to a lot of this and actually posting them and using them as part of her content. And so this article is really focusing on what does a core content strategy look like that helps you address some of these different kinds of challenges that you experience as a handmade business owner. And one thing that really stuck with me is when she said, somewhere along the way, writing my insecurities down and forming them into meaningful articles began to be therapy for me. What an interesting take, right? It helped her actually work through some of her various insecurities, to be able to talk about different things. I mean, let's face it, we all have them. I have them too. You have them. We all have certain things that make us insecure about our businesses. But actually actively talking about that was something that helped her get past her insecurities. And so one of the things that she also talked about is she would get that "you're too expensive" comment. And she said here, and I quote, "You know how soul-sucking that comment can feel." How do you address that as a handmade business owner? Especially when people are hateful about it, as if you're somehow raking in the big bucks making this. You're not. You're trying to survive. You're trying to thrive as your business. And so she got into, there's nothing that is helpful about that kind of feedback, and most of us have been there. But she wasn't quite brave enough to start that at first. So she started talking about some other types of topics and worked her way up to the "you're too expensive" article. And she started feeling a little saucy when she got to that. And so she said, compared to what? Now think about that. It's matching that confrontational attitude back with compared to what exactly, and allowing for a meaningful dialogue. And so she has started using some of these core pieces of content to address different areas of her business in a very unique way, and in a way that actually makes customer service easier. So now when someone actually responds and says, oh, her handmade ornaments are too expensive, she can link straight to that article explaining compared to what, and talk about what goes into actually running a small business. That stops most people dead in their tracks when they actually understand what it takes for us to run these businesses. So I think you will find a lot of value in this article and in the core philosophies that she shares about how do you go about creating those pieces of core content for your business. So it's a wonderful feature. It's got beautiful pictures of her and her husband. They run the business together. And like many handmade businesses that have a few different people that address different aspects of it. And so she even gets into what kind of core content you should create for your business, making this an absolutely fantastic read. So now our next article, I wanted to get something a little different and to get you really thinking. And something stuck in my mind from conversations with other artisans that have been talking about wanting a desire to travel. And I also knew that for a lot of people, affordability and travel don't always fit together. And so I wanted to come up with a creative way that, hey, how can handmade business owners also travel? And this is a thesis that I'm going to be working on a number of follow-on articles. And this is just the first one of ideas on how you can actually bake that in as part of your business. And for most of you too, if the travel is part of your business, those are also business expenses. And while I'm not giving you tax advice, you should really look into things like that because they are ways that actually make things possible that might not be possible personally. So now this article is, are travel retreats your next great adventure? So for this one, I had Christine Walker write a guest article for us as part of this, and she actually runs PeaceTree Fiber Adventures. So while hers are focused around fiber, I think there's a lot of value in what you'll hear about how this actually works and how you can actually structure travel retreats. So she talks about her history. How did she get into travel retreats? I mean, that's a pretty specific niche, and that is her business, running travel retreats. So she gives an inside look at the industry and how it's changing. And then she talks about, when do you consider doing travel by yourself, planning your own types of retreats, or when might you want to get professionals involved? And there is some nuance there. It's not all about just sharing the revenue. There's nuance and knowledge and skill sets and your capacity to actually do things. And so she has, in this gorgeous article, she shares about what some of her domestic in the US retreats look like versus what some of her international retreats look like. And it'll inspire you to really start to dream a little bit. If starting to dream has been a struggle for you lately, this ought to be a great one to really help you start to think about dreaming again and going other places and doing other things. And so she is a great statement here. No one is really alone when crafting is involved. It's true. People love what handmade businesses do in so much capacity. And this is a great story and a lot of interesting insights from Christine. Now, our next feature is 5 questions with Pedddle. Are you familiar with Pedddle? Pedddle is a UK-based company, although they are expanding in the US as well. And I interview the creator and the visionary force behind Pedddle, which is Nicki Capewell. And Nicki has been evolving and tinkering with this business over the years to create a series of unique offerings. And so each issue we do a 5 questions with, where we ask 5 questions of someone that we think is really doing something unique in the handmade industry. Sometimes it's a marketplace, sometimes it's an individual company, it might be a services company. We have a wide range of features, but our whole thesis behind it is someone who we think you should pay attention to because of the uniqueness of what they're doing. And Nicki has been around for a number of years, and she does some really interesting things around craft fairs in the UK, how to find things, how to extend some things, and I think she has some very unique perspectives that you will love. And it for her, It's been a pleasure to work as part of this. It's had its challenges like anything. I mean, who doesn't have challenges, and you run a company that many years? But she also talks about how markets can easily become both a time and money black hole if you are not careful. And so she has some advice about how to be analytical about your business in here that I think you'll come to appreciate. Now, our next article is a guest contribution from Alise Morales. This is actually one of my favorite pictures I've ever put in the magazine. She is such a fun and spunky and interesting person, and I think you are going to absolutely love hearing from Alise. She has her own business, Jasper and Elm, and she's very well known for her candy necklaces, and you'll see a lot of themes around these. But now Alise is going to talk about something that is very different in disruptive change to your business. And she has gone through something very unique. She's a military spouse, and she has been uprooted multiple times and had to physically move. She started her business in Jacksonville, Florida, was there for several years, built up a following, and then bam, had a military move. Now, how many of us have been hit with a circumstance where, guess what, something changed, and now we had to completely uproot the way we had done our business? So she moved to Washington State as part of that deployment and was beginning again. She was starting, she was rebuilding. It's always hard when you go into a new market because now you have to meet new people. It takes time to build up to get into the new markets. And she had just been making progress on that when bam, another move. Again, across the country. That's a very challenging type of situation. But a lot of what she's done to cope with it is she's developed a lot of mantras. What does she tell herself to get through this difficult time? How is she gentle with herself? And I think that is really the wisdom of this article, is about how you can actually manage and deal with and cope with this kind of a time period. One of the things that she said that I think was insightful is, I'm the one who determines what success is, not the people I see on social media. It's so easy for social media to be the highlight reel and everything's great and we're supposed to pretend everything's wonderful. And yet she has really come to recognize how much she has to define what is success in this stage, and how is she actually figuring out what her business should look like through this time period. She's had to make a lot of really challenging decisions, and I think anyone that's been at it for a while and had to evolve their business will understand having to make these kind of decisions and appreciate the lens with which she used to make those difficult decisions. The next one is clever, eco-friendly packaging approaches. Packaging is one of the most requested topics. People love to talk about packaging. And in the last couple of years, we've tried to make sure we featured packaging articles both in videos, on our website, through our magazine, because there's always an evolution in terms of the trends, what's available. People need a plan A and a plan B with packaging too, because sometimes you can't even get the things that you're looking for. So in this particular article, I wanted to feature different artisans that were using unique packaging approaches. And so I feature 3 different artisans as part of this article. And the first one is Soak It Up, which they actually manufacture a very clever greeting card that also turns into a rag. Very interesting product, really cool in terms of what she created. This is from Carla Schultz from Soak It Up Cards. I also feature Kieran Williams from Bee Kissed and Gina DeSantis of Gina DeSantis Ceramics as part of this. And each one of these little case studies actually gets into why were they looking at the more eco-friendly solutions, what was happening in the business, and what made sense for them. And so for Clards, for her it was really about necessity, because she actually got into the View Your Deal during COVID, and all of a sudden she was facing, had to be able to fulfill 5,000 orders, discounted by 50%. So she had to get very clever with her packaging to make sure that this was still going to be profitable for her. And so she designed a very custom solution, and if you want to know more about that, you're just going to have to read the magazine. Now the next one is Beekist, who did some very interesting things with their packaging product. And in fact, they're doing some 3D printing. This is an unusual solution. This met the needs that they had for the kind of packaging that they needed to do. And originally the Beekist project started as a family enterprise with a focus on teaching his boys, 10 and 12, that they didn't have to work for anyone else. Lots of businesses start this way. You're in it with your kids and you're doing something great, and then all of a sudden you inherit some business when they're done with it. So it was a lot of fun as he started to create it, but he didn't like the tin containers he was using, so he wanted to evolve into a new container. And it was after a trip to India in 2023 that he was thinking about all of these different things. And that is when he actually came up with the innovation for how he could actually use 3D printing to make his containers. And again, for his product, that actually made sense. It doesn't make sense for everybody's product. And then the final feature, Gina DeSantis, was also really a fun piece to put together. So for Gina, she has been a ceramicist since 1999. That's when she first got started on her, so she's been around a while. She's had time to transform, time to change her business. She is currently stocked by over 300 national retailers, including Nordstrom, Anthropologie, and Uncommon Goods. So she's really grown her business, right? She's been at it a long time. She's figured out how to evolve it. Now think about that. She's in over 300 businesses. It's going to present some unique challenges, isn't it? Just think about how much raw material goes into creating enough product for 300 wholesale accounts. That's a lot. So she's found herself in a constant cycle of reusing materials to produce their goods. She's really trying to make the studio less wasteful. How, in terms of what she is making, can she basically consume less? So she's using limited plastic through things, but 80% of what she uses is recyclable, and biodegradable. Talk about progress, right? That's great to see that. But then she also uses a honeycomb packing paper that stretches to wrap goods. And she invested in a cardboard recycling machine. So she shares the story about what that's been like and how that's been able to transform things for her business. So if you want to understand more about what customers have said, what she's learned about that process, and how that's fit in for her, you can check out that article. Now this next one, this was a lot of fun. As many of you know, we also have created the Handmade channel, which is a streaming channel on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and on Google TV. If you want to see the complete list of places that the Handmade channel is available, you can go to thehandmadechannel.com and find that information. But as part of starting to stream basically comfort TV for the artisan and craft lifestyle, it's not a business channel, it's a consumer channel. It's fun, it's cool stuff, it's neat artisans, but it's also made me cognizant of when you're trying something wildly different like that, in addition to things that you're already doing, where do you get permission to do these things? I often hear a lot of people talk about, I can't believe you created a channel. And I thought, well, why does someone have to give me permission to go do this? Do you ever wonder that? Why do you wait for permission to do things? It's a really easy trap for us to get into, is thinking someone's supposed to magically tell us it's okay for us to go do something. I also like to say that some of us of a certain generation will recognize this, to say we lean in until we fall over. We're always trying to get someone to tell us it's okay for us to do something. And I was like, yeah, we need to throw that out. We need to forget about that. And then I came across this article that Amelia had written about greenlighting yourself. And that formed the genesis of this article that I've written about Amelia. Amelia's a filmmaker in East Tennessee. Her name's Amelia Bartlett. If you want to go find her, you can find her on various socials. You can find her on Instagram, you can find her on Threads, maybe YouTube, I'm not sure. I haven't double checked that one. But she wrote an article about greenlighting yourself. But more importantly than that, this is not a rah, rah, you can do it. No, that's not what this article is. This is really about how do you greenlight yourself. There's a very specific process that she followed, and that's actually what we talk about in the article. Because essentially what Amelia was doing is building a film and production companies in East Tennessee, not exactly known as a mecca for filmmaking, much like many places are not. I mean, outside of LA or New York, how do you become a filmmaker and build all of that up if you're not in a major hub? That applies for most of us. We aren't where all the supposed action is at. How do we still contribute meaningfully and be able to create those things that we want to on our terms? And so that's a big part of her ethos, is how did she do that? A lot of it initially started from a very natural progression. So she learned filmmaking. She started as an actor, and she was unsatisfied with the kinds of roles that she was able to have access to. That led her to starting to write the kinds of roles that she wanted. So she started creating for herself the material she wanted. Well, as soon as she started doing that, she had to start producing things because, well, who was going to actually make sure the production happened? So she started to get into producing, then she started getting into filmmaking, and it really was a natural evolution of a process, taking it one step at a time, learning as you go, greenlighting yourself all the way. So the concept of greenlit in the film industry is essentially approval for production, typically dependent on meeting milestones that justify the risk. And that is, I think, the most interesting part. She talks about how do you create the milestones that allow you to get comfortable taking the risk. I mean, who doesn't need that, right? It's basically a roadmap for how to give yourself permission to do it, especially when that becomes challenging. For a lot of people, they're waiting for perfection, or they don't know, well, should I try something? This is really a good way to learn about how do you actually do that based on someone that's done it themselves. So this one was borrowed from the film industry, but I think is going to be something incredibly inspiring for readers. Our final article, I picked a new revenue stream. Almost every feature, I pick a different revenue stream. And I really try to dig deep when I dig into these revenue streams. A lot of times people will talk about, as a handmade business, you have craft fairs, you have wholesale, and you have your e-commerce presence. And those are your 3 revenue streams. I'm like, there's so much more to it than that. That is just scratching the surface. There's a lot of ways to build a business, and that's why every magazine I explore a different revenue stream, because I want to give you an idea of, I hadn't thought about that. How could I build that revenue stream? And I do that with case studies in each of these cases. And so this one is custom without the chaos. Have you ever thought about getting into more custom work? And you'll see people talk about, the horror stories online. I never do that. People are so difficult to deal with. Not if you have a good process, they're not. So how do you create a process to be able to do custom work without it turning into utter chaos? So I have 2 artisans that are part of this, and this one was done in conjunction. My friends over at Maker Marketplace are the ones that actually recommended these artisans, and so super grateful for them recommending and helping me find people that can talk about a custom commissions process. So the first person that I feature is Simon, and Simon is part of Simon Metz Woodworking. So he is a fine furniture maker. Think like custom dressers, tables, gorgeous, gorgeous woodwork. And he just really loves the design process of coming up with these gorgeous designs and bringing them to life for something that is beautiful in your home. These are creating pieces that are going to become treasured heirlooms for you. This isn't like your little IKEA table down the street. So it's a very different path. And he shares his considerations. These are from many years worth of lessons learned on how do you actually do this and build this in such a way that you don't go insane. So he talks about things about how do you push back on clients. He shares examples of ways that he has done this in the past and what has worked for him. What kinds of things to accept, what kinds of things to decline, and how to make that decision. And then how to actually really lay out a custom project because they are their own beast. This is very unique, very cool, wonderful information. The second person that we feature is Jim from Shop Dog Turnery. Jim has been a long-time woodworker as well, and for him, it's in his DNA because literally his parents built the house he grew up in, like literally built the house. So he's always been had this thesis and this hands-on and woodworking and all of that skill. And so he had his traditional career. And then as an aside to that, he started doing woodworking. So it was a hobby business for Jim. And it's something that he's continued into his retirement from traditional employment. He was a professor. And as part of it, so how did Jim get into custom work? His wife, Joanne, they had an agreement that because he started buying all these expensive tools, he had to do something with them and that the shop should pay for itself. So that's how he got into his side business. A fun story, and we can all sort of smile and having had someone in our life that says, if you're going to spend that much money on it, maybe you should do something with it. And he actually then also shares some things that are, I think, a unique perspective that a lot of people don't talk about. For him, finding customers is actually not the hard part. That's not saying finding customers is easy, but understanding where people are going to come from and how big you want the business to be. So for him, a lot of his business is word of mouth. He's been in business for a long time. And in terms of how to find your customers, he gets into some really interesting nuance here that I think people will appreciate. And he gets into how does he know what kind of events to do based on his business. I'm not giving this one away. You're going to have to read the magazine for this. But I think this is very insightful. If you go to a lot of events and you're like, well, how do I know? He gives you a way to actually look at it that is very unique and that I haven't seen someone talk about all that much. He also talks about the challenges around pricing. This is a unique one for many handmade businesses. And we aren't just talking about, put your materials in there and then add a labor cost. He gets into why pricing is so complicated for so many of us. He also talks about a particular set, a bocce set that he makes, and there are multiple different methodologies and what multiple different methodologies would result in for prices. This is very interesting information. And then how does he actually decide how to price it? But guess what? I'm not giving it away on this video. You're going to have to get a copy of the magazine if you want to see Jim's insights on that. And he also shows this absolutely exquisite work that he makes. Isn't that gorgeous? So that's it. That's everything that is in the next magazine. A little more information about the articles. Well, why did I pick them? And some of the insights into what it actually takes to produce this magazine. Each quarter I do a different magazine, and we do both a print and digital version of it. I understand a lot of people might not necessarily want something printed all the time. You have to store it with all your other stuff, but we also have digital copies of it available as well for purchase. You can find the information on our website, or you can find some of it in the description for this show as well. And so thank you for joining me for a sneak peek at what it actually looks like for our summer magazine, and a huge thank you to all of the artisans that have participated as part of this.